Hello and welcome to the Shakespeare podcast. In this episode, we'll take a look at what happens in Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. The story of Julius Caesar and his assassination is not the story of Shakespeare's play. Shakespeare organises events and compresses time to suit his own needs. He also focuses on ideas and themes that are important for the drama but would have no place in a purely historical account of events. This is most obvious with the opening of the play. I have said in other podcasts how important it is to give special attention to the openings of Shakespeare's plays, and Julius Caesar is no different. The play opens on an ordinary street in Rome. The characters don't have names, they're called carpenter and cobbler. Flavius and Marillus are city officials who want to know why these men are not at work. Although these common characters have no names, Shakespeare gives them personality. The cobbler fancies himself as a bit of a card, a bit of a Jack the Lad. Marillus calls him, quote, a saucy fellow, and asks what his trade is. The cobbler replies that he's a mender of soles. Get it? That when souls are in danger, he mends them, and that some very important men have walked about in shoes that he has mended. When asked why he's leading men in the street, he says it's to get them to wear out their shoes, so he'll have more work for himself. Of course, they're really there to cheer on Julius Caesar after his triumph over Pompey, which leads Marillus to his immortal line, "You blocks, you stones, you worse than senseless things." These are, quote, the poor men, or, quote, the vulgar, who once cheered Pompey and are now cheering for Julius Caesar. This is why the play opens with this scene of commoners out in the street. It's the commoners, the vulgar, the poor men, who decide the fate of the Republic. They make Flavius and Marillus nervous with their hero worship of Caesar, and it is to these commoners that Antony will appeal to in Act 3, when Antony says, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears." He's talking to the cobbler and the carpenter. Thus Shakespeare establishes right at the start of the play that for all the great men in the drama, they're all appealing to the crowd in the forum. The poor man, the vulgar, the cobbler and the carpenter. They need the public in order to exercise their power. And so, to Act 1, Scene 2, enter Julius Caesar with his mate Antony, his wife Calphurnia, and some of their other friends, quote unquote, Brutus and Cassius and all the rest. And it's made plain that anything Caesar wants, he gets. Calphurnia and Antony obey him without question. The stage direction here, Senate, has been added later. It means a fanfare. And right at the beginning, the soothsayer tells Caesar to, quote, beware the Ides of March. This is the kind of stuff the audience has come to see. But it's also a reminder to us about what's going to happen later in the play. Everyone exits except Brutus and Cassius initiates a conversation about why Brutus should look so troubled. Actually, Cassius has a good idea why Brutus is looking so troubled. When they hear a noise off stage, Brutus wonders if they've made Caesar king already. Cassius recounts a story of how he saved Caesar from drowning in the Tiber. And now he's supposed to be a god. Or that time in Spain when Caesar got the fevers and was as helpless as a little girl. And now he bestrides the world, and Brutus and Cassius are supposed to be nobodies. I mean, that's okay for Cassius, but Brutus is from a noble family, and he should be on the same level with Caesar. Brutus says that he'll think about what Cassius has said, but he knows full well what Cassius is alluding to, that Caesar is getting too popular and too powerful, that soon he'll take over all of Rome. Caesar returns from the games to tell us that Cassius is a dangerous man. We, of course, the audience, we already knew that. And Casca tells us Caesar refused a crown offered to him by Antony 3 times. but it was all a show for the crowd, the common people. Notice that during this show of humility, Caesar has an epileptic seizure, which was seen by Shakespeare's audience as a mysterious disease known as, quote, falling sickness. Many people thought that it was a sacred state which indicated an inner struggle, psychological, emotional or spiritual. Cassius makes the joke that they're the ones with falling sickness. That is, if they fall under Caesar's power. After Brutus departs, Cassius has a speech in which he acknowledges that Caesar doesn't like him, that he can sway Brutus' ideas, and that he has a plan to make Brutus the centre of the conspiracy. Scene 3, Casca tells us there are terrible omens of fire from heaven and wild animals wandering about. There's a storm and a tempest like Casca has never seen before. Notice the Romans were famous for being very superstitious. They thought you could see into the future by killing a chicken and reading its entrails. Caesar actually does this in the next act. Cassius appears to say that he loves the storm and all the omens because it means the revolution is coming and that they're going to overthrow a tyrant. Casca says it's Caesar and the Senate will make him king tomorrow. Yes, Cassius is delighted because tomorrow he's going to throw off tyranny for, quote, that part of tyranny that I do bear I can shake off at pleasure. Cassius wonders if Casca is with him. Casca says he is, and Cassius tells him that there are plenty of noblemen who are ready to act. Enter Cinna, and Cassius tells them that the plan is to get Brutus on board. It's the night before the assassination, and the conspiracy is forming and ready to go. And that is the end of Act 1. Act 2, Brutus is restless and can't sleep. He's thinking about Caesar being king, what a disaster that would be for Rome, and should they kill Caesar before he's made king. Brutus has been affected by Cassius's speech. He tells us that Cassius arrives with the conspirators and Brutus lets them in. Cassius and Brutus speak privately, while Cinna and Casca discuss a new dawn. Get it? Brutus has a speech about not swearing on their enterprise because they don't need to swear. Their cause is just and they are honest men. They argue over whether Cicero should be included in the conspiracy and who else they should kill after the deed has been done. Cassius says they should also kill Antony, but Brutus argues against it. One of his arguments is that it will be unpopular with the public. This decision will prove fateful for everyone involved. They make their plans for the assassination and disperse. Enter Portia, Brutus's wife, who knows something is wrong and wants to know what's going on. She calls Brutus sick. Before enter Lysigenus, who is physically sick but wants to do his bit in the noble enterprise. In the next scene, Caesar talks to his wife, Calphurnia, about what's going on, just as Brutus has just spoken to Portia, his wife, about what's happening. And Caesar has the priests check the entrails of a chicken. They tell him not to go out, and Calphurnia tells Caesar not to go to the Senate, and the soothsayer has already warned Caesar to beware the Ides of March. The general vibe here is that Caesar should stay home, and Caesar decides that the smart thing to do would be to stay home and not go to the Senate that day. Enter Decius, who we, the audience, know is part of the conspiracy. He convinces Caesar to ignore the supernatural signs and go to the Senate anyway. Enter the rest of the conspirators, and we, the audience, can see the danger that Caesar is in without being able to do anything about it. Act 2, Scene 3. The plot is uncovered by Artemidiorus. Will Caesar get a warning before he's assassinated? And Portia now knows what the plot is. Brutus has obviously told her, and she wants to know what's happening, but doesn't want to say anything to the servants. And the soothsayer appears to say that Caesar needs a warning. Portia can hardly contain herself with nervous excitement and worry. Meanwhile, in Act 3, Caesar meets the soothsayer and ignores the warning a last time. Then Artemidorus tries to get Caesar to read his letter, warning him, but Caesar ignores him. Then Popilius makes a comment about your enterprise to Cassius, and Cassius thinks that they might be betrayed. Metellio tries to get Caesar revoke a ban on his brother, but Caesar will not. This is the pretext for the assassination. After the deed is done, the conspirators disperse the crowd and try to calm things down. Then they wash their hands in Caesar's blood as a sign of liberty and talk of how their deeds will be remembered through history. Enter Antony, who says he's ready to die, but Brutus says they'd much rather have him as a friend. Antony says he only wants to take Caesar's body to the marketplace and speak at his funeral. Cassius doesn't like the idea, but Brutus overrules him. Antony then has a speech where he curses the conspirators and tells us, the audience, what he really thinks. Octavius is come to Rome, and Antony tells him not to come into the city until it's safer. So, a note here, Octavius is Julius Caesar's nephew, and is a boy of about 14 or 15 years old. Antony's going to need him as a representative of Caesar's family. Octavius' servant and Antony carry Caesar's body to the marketplace. Act 3, Scene 2 shows Brutus and Cassius trying to convince the plebeians, that is, the general public, that they were right to kill Julius Caesar. Brutus' argument is a little confused and a little contorted, but he says that he had to kill Caesar for the good of Rome, even though he was best mates with him. The public agrees with Brutus. Caesar was a tyrant who had to die, and therefore when it's Antony's turn to speech, the audience is hostile. However, Antony's speech is able to sway the public, whom Shakespeare seems to be suggesting that the public is fickle and shallow. Anyway, by the end of Antony's speech, Brutus and Cassius are traitors, and they want to burn down Brutus's house. The plebeians exit to go riot the place up. Octavius and Lepidus have arrived, and Antony goes to meet them at Caesar's house. Brutus and Cassius have fled the city for fear of being lynched by the mob. The plebeians, riled up by Antony's speech, find Cinna the poet and carry him off to kill him and all the other conspirators. That was Act 3. And a pretty hectic act it was too. Act 4 opens with Antony, Octavius and Lepidus deciding who shall be executed. It's almost as if they've got clipboards. Lepidus' brother, well, he's a goner. Antony's nephew Publius, yeah, he can be executed. Lepidus leaves and Antony shows Octavius what he really thinks. They'll string Lepidus along while he's useful, and then dump him when they're done with him. The young Octavius says he's a tried and valiant soldier. So is my horse, says Antony. Octavius and Antony agree to pool their resources to fight Brutus and Cassius. Meanwhile, in Scene 2, Brutus and his camp are waiting for Cassius to arrive. Things are not looking good for the conspirators. Cassius arrives, upset with Brutus. Brutus and Cassius fall out over corruption and money. Brutus says that they didn't kill Caesar for the sake of robbers. And Cassius says, you need to be realistic, we're not in a position to pick who we do business with. They argue and fall out, only to make up again. But we, the audience, we know that it's not a good sign. A poet appears to try and reconcile them. We discover that Portia, Brutus's wife, is dead. Brutus and Cassius start drinking. News comes from Rome that 100 senators have been put to death, including Cicero, who we know had nothing to do with the plot to kill Caesar. They leave for the evening. Lucius plays us a song. Everyone's asleep except Brutus, who sees the ghost of Julius Caesar, and the ghost tells Brutus that he'll see him again at Philippi, the place of the battle. Brutus, who appears to be unafraid of death, wakes everyone to get them up to go to Philippi. The end of the road is in sight for the conspirators, and so to Act 5, only the battle remains. Octavius won't let Antony tell him what to do, notice, because, of course, he's going to go on to become Caesar Augustus. And then there's the scene where Brutus and Cassius have a chat with Antony and Octavius. Notice it's Octavius who gives the orders to the officers, and it's Octavius who begins the conversation with Brutus. Antony insults them both, and Cassius reminds Brutus that if he'd had his way, Antony would be dead already. Again, Octavius is referred to as Caesar because he's Julius Caesar's nephew, so they both have the same surname. They trade insults and exit. Cassius says it's his birthday and that he doesn't feel lucky. He never cared much about signs, but now he thinks the signs are against them. Cassius and Brutus agree they won't be trophies of war and led bound through the streets of Rome. Act 5, Scene 2, Brutus sends Messala with orders to the soldiers. Act 5, Scene 3, Cassius is losing, but Titanus blames Brutus for the tactical error. Pindarus kills Cassius as Cassius asks him to and gets the hell out of there. Turns out, although Cassius lost to Antony, Brutus has triumphed over Octavius. Good news for Cassius. Oh dear, it's too late. Looks like Pindarus, the bondsman, set up Cassius and made him believe they'd lost when they'd won. Then Titanius kills himself on Cassius's sword, and enter Brutus and friends to blame the spirit of Julius Caesar for all the chaos and calamity. Act 5, Scene 4, things are unravelling fast for Brutus. Lucilius pretends to be Brutus to the soldiers, but Antony arrives and he knows that he's not Brutus, but tells the soldiers to look after him anyway. Act 5, Scene 5, Brutus is alone with a few friends, but none of them will help him fall on his sword. In the end, they all run away except Strato, who helps Brutus kill himself. Enter Octavius and Antony to find Brutus dead. All Brutus's followers are pardoned, and Antony has a speech to say what a noble soul Brutus was. And Octavius says he'll bury Brutus like a soldier honourably. And that's Act 5 and the end of the story of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. So to recap what we've learned in this episode, Act 1, the people of Rome wait for Caesar. Caesar's triumphant entry into the city. Cassius tries to convince Brutus to join the conspiracy as Antony offers Caesar a crown. That's offstage, later described by Casca. There are strange omens and Cassius is delighted by it. The conspirators are at work. Act 2, it starts in Brutus's garden the night before the assassination. Conspirators are planning. Portia knows something is happening. Caesar doesn't like the signs and omens and won't go to the Senate. Decius convinces him otherwise. Will the conspiracy be discovered? Act 3, Julius Caesar murdered. Antony arrives to take the body to the marketplace. Brutus convinces the plebeians that Caesar needed to be killed. Antony's speech convinces them otherwise. Cinna is killed by the mob. Act 4, Antony, Octavius and Lepidus draw up a list of people who will be executed. Cassius and Brutus fall out but make up again, and Brutus sees the ghost of Julius Caesar. Act 5 is the Battle of Philippi, the death of Brutus and Cassius, the end. So, I hope this has helped you place the events of the play in the correct acts, and I hope this will help you. And we'll see you next time on the Shakespeare podcast.